So without further ado, I would like to introduce Bo and Nick, and I'll let you guys take it away from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith. Like you said, my name's Bo. I work for workforce.com, do a lot of analytics, implementations, things oriented on the software side and how we address business needs. Nick, did you want to give a quick introduction?
Hi, all. Yeah, Nick Brabin. I'm a general manager in the hospitality industry. I've worked in hospitality for almost 20 years now. Stepped away and am doing a lot of hospitality analysis and working with workforce.com on those sorts of things. So looking forward to having a yarn about things in the United States.
Awesome. So to start it off, before we get into how we're going to combat the rising operating costs within the hospitality industry, it's probably pretty good to understand how we got into this situation. So the situation obviously comes from the COVID-19 pandemic. I had an interesting little quote that I found from the International Monetary Fund, which was that the COVID-19 shock can be interpreted as a combination of supply and demand shocks. The supply shock was mainly driven by the restriction of activities due to lockdowns and the distancing measures to contain the spread of the virus, causing sectors to struggle to keep up with demand. While the demand shock reflected both the income effect suffered by workers in the restricted activities, as well as the diminished mobility and changes in the consumption patterns due to contagion concerns. So, and that all happened very rapidly. And if you want to participate, we're actually asking a poll right now as well to see how you feel about the US economy. So feel free to chime in on those answers while we talk. But so with that, and with that crazy supply and demand issues, our unemployment hit nearly 15%, and our employment to population ratio was 51%. So with such stark economic outlook, we ended up having a lot of federal intervention within the economy. And you can kind of see in that graph how it goes starkly down in Q2 of 2020, and then we see a very sharp recovery. And we actually had an increase in Q1 of 2021 of 6.4% on our GDP, which is awesome. The bad part on that is that the US inflation rate is hitting a 13-year high. So that 13-year high, the previous one was from the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And so we can see a lot of that federal spending, which has helped prop us up a lot, has also contributed to our costs going up, not only as individuals, but as our businesses too. So as that inflation has increased, we're also seeing an increase in the cost of employees, part of that from the inflation itself, and then part from that federal spending. So a lot of employees, they're trying to focus more on what they want out of their jobs. You know, they've had a year off to kind of understand where they want to be. They've seen work-life balances. A lot of health concerns are going into play here. Employers are scrambling to find help with the increase in demand, with the economy being compelled by this federal intervention. We're seeing a lot of increase in sales in the hospitality industry. I'm not sure if Nick, you had insights in those and how those have come into play.
Yeah, look, I think it's been interesting to note that, especially like in the United States, and it's a story across the Western world at the moment, but there's never been more jobs available, but less people to fill them. And you know, with the rising inflation, the cost pressures on businesses, whether it's the smallest restaurant or bar through to the largest hotel, is really squeezing that profit margin tightly. And you know, we'll chat more about that later. But it's a really interesting time, and this rapid scale up after such a drastic slowdown for the whole world is putting a unique pressure on everything, and it's going to be really hard to navigate.
Definitely. Specifically to the hospitality industry, I think we can go ahead and go into how those operating costs get divvied up and what's being affected most. Specifically, we're looking at a lot of changes in wage costs. So people are really demanding these higher increases. McDonald's is our example here, a couple of their signs. really trying to get creative in terms of how we're going to get people to work for us and at what value we're going to work for. So we're seeing free iPhones, we're hiring people at $18 an hour or $15 an hour, or even giving out $50 gift cards for just interviewing. And so we have another poll going up on the screen right now for if your organization is planning on increasing wage to incentivize these possible new hires.
It's really interesting to see like this upper wage pressure happening.
Right.
And it's going to be really interesting for smaller businesses, you know, the mum and pop businesses out there to battle the larger businesses when they start offering these wages. So everyone's going to start thinking about what else they can offer. What is it that people are looking for outside of a higher wage? You know, what is it in that work-life balance you can offer? Is it extra training? Is it improving the workplace? All these things need to come into play now, because money's not going to be the only driver that you're going to be able to use to attract people in a job market that's so wide open at the moment.
Right. I think it's so interesting. You know, I saw that top right image on Twitter, and it was just retweeted thousands, like millions of times. And I think people are really torn, you know, and that feeds back into the unbalance here. And, you know, I think it'll be really interesting to see how this bodes in September when the government stimulus checks get cut.
Look, I think,
Definitely.
you know, it's not all pessimism as well. There's always a lag when things scale up so quickly,
Right.
when the economy rebounds so quickly, and you need to scale up quickly and find people to help, and you know, the demand really increases because people are set free again, so to speak. Like, things will get better and catch up, but navigating now is going to, and you get it right now, it's going to put you in good stead for the future when things do return to some sort of normal as well.
For sure. Completely agree. You know, yin and yang to everything, right? It's all about that balance.
Cool. Specifically, we've got a visual depiction of restaurant operating costs, which I know Nick can talk really well on, but it's always pretty surprising to see just how much labor costs feed into the cost of how restaurants, as well as, you know, any other hospitality restaurant or industries go. So
yeah, well, you know, I spoke about that profit margin being squeezed earlier, and the pizza pie is a great little
Right.
graphic showing how hard it is to run a hospitality business. People aren't necessarily willing to pay more for a cup of coffee or for a burger or for a beer. Wages are continuing to go up, and that's in all advanced economies. You might have noticed I'm Australian, and it's the same story in Australia as the United States. Wages are going up, and Australia is probably a bit further along the journey as well. So, you know, businesses in Australia have learned how to manage their labour costs really carefully, and that's the way businesses in the United States are going to have to really focus down, especially in hospitality, to cut that 30% down. And there are ways you can do it, which we'll go into later, but that's going to be the easiest and the quickest wins that you can get. Definitely that managing that labor cost, and you know, that's obviously where workforce.com can help a lot, but cost of goods as well we'll touch on a bit further along. You know, what Meredith dug out here, hotels need to maintain labor costs between 20 to 25%. It's probably rare at the moment that anyone's actually achieving that, and if you are, excellent, like doing so well. But you know, at the end, people are climbing closer to 50%. That's just not going to cut the mustard. You know, moving ahead, your businesses won't survive. So it's really, really, really important that this increased focus on labour costs is maintained. And you know, we're probably not telling you anything you don't all already know if you work in hospitality, but it's really good to rehash them and think about it simply. Simple things that you can do in the current climate to improve your business, to improve those margins, and to protect your business for the future, the jobs of your employees for the future, and all those positive things. So discounting at the moment, there's low capacity in the market. Like, everyone's in the same boat. There's not enough people to fill jobs. Everyone's operating at lower capacity. There's less availability of experiences out there in the economy. So don't be afraid to not discount at the moment. People are willing to spend money. They have they have been compressed. They've been in lockdowns. They've not been able to travel as freely. Everyone's got a bit of money to spend in their local economy. So don't be afraid about not going hard on those discounts, because an extra couple of percent every week is going to make all the difference incrementally at the back end of the year when you look at your profit and loss.
Right.
Not even just the local economies too. I was talking to one of our large hotel clients, and they were saying that their bookings for the summer of 2021, by the time July 1 hit, were already at or above the levels of 2019. So people are also trying to get out of the house. They're trying to see more and be a part of the global economy again. And so I think those discounts probably don't need to be as severe or even happen anymore. So it's good insight.
Making small increases throughout the menu. Again, it's playing into that idea that there is a compression within availability out there. So, charging a few dollars more for certain things, people will pay it, because it's hard to get tables at the moment. It's hard to get bookings at the moment. Everywhere's getting kind of busy, because either they're at reduced capacity because of restrictions, they're at reduced capacity because of the labor shortage, or there's just so many people wanting to get out on a nice day because they haven't been able to do that for so long, over the last 18 months. So don't be afraid to price properly, manage your menu costs really well, analyze what your cost of goods are, line by line, item by item, and get it right, so that you are profitable week after week after week. Yeah. Working with distributors, again, playing into that cost of goods area. Like, distributors have had it as hard as everyone in hospitality, without a doubt, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't negotiate. Never be unwilling to negotiate. Distributors are great and will work with you really well in the good times. They need to work with you in the bad times as well. Use those personal relationships you have with suppliers. Lean on them. Help them, get them to help you. And when things rebound, they're still gonna have a good customer. Play these games, get those prices down, and lock them in. Contract, lock it in. If you get a good price, lock it in for as long as you can, so that you can maintain that menu costing, maintain that menu pricing, keep the profit margin, and stay afloat. Yeah. Staff scheduling, obviously, we've touched on the labor costs, and when we're talking about staff scheduling, we're not just about like how many staff you have on at the right times to service. It's really about thinking about what's going to happen in the future as well. Now's the time to take stock of what's happened historically, look ahead, and take the time to really think what's going to happen on Tuesday next week, what's going to happen on Wednesday next week. Get those rosters and those schedules right, so that your labor costs are lined up perfectly with what you think those sales are going to be. I think in the current climate, you're going to prefer to be understaffed than overstaffed. Play that line really finely at the moment. It would be my suggestion. Don't be afraid to turn one or two people away because you can't do it, because that's going to be better than paying that extra staff member to be around and not be needed, because that's going to really drag you down week after week when everything's so tight. Yeah. Combining supplier orders. So, are there efficiencies we can find in those supply chains so that the same trucks visiting us or visiting us on less days, those delivery fees are cut down, the transit fees are cut down? Like, with the inflation going the way it is that Bo was touching on earlier, things like, we know how expensive fuel is per gallon these days. That's not going away. So being able to combine these orders, get things on one truck, or reduce the amount of trucks is a very easy way. Negotiate, work out how that can work, and lower those delivery fees that you might have on some of those orders that you receive. The big one, overtime hours. For those of you that have to deal with that, I know it's different across the country, but something like workforce.com can really help you there as well, which we'll touch on. Push notifications, warning you on rosters when you're going to go into overtime, warning you before it happens so that you can get it right, because you really can't afford that right now. And especially with the wage pressure going up and the games everyone's playing and paying more and more above minimum wage, you really, really need to focus on those outliers at the back end of the week when you tend to pay more than you absolutely need to.
Yeah. You know, Susanna actually asked a really great question in the chat, kind of relating to that minimum wage aspect. So what is your guys' take on, hotels not providing daily housekeeping, cleaning? Do you think this is going to be temporary? Do you think it's going to be to stay?
Interesting question. I mean, the hospitality person within me hates to see those things disappear.
Right.
How do we do it more efficiently? Look, I don't have the answer at the moment. I think every venue is going to be different. Every operation is going to be different. But that said, you got to do what you got to do to survive, right? And I think the general public at the moment are accepting of those circumstances as well. Everyone understands that things are not normal, so
Right.
Use that to your advantage as well.
And I think there's always going to be a market too of people similar to Nick who are going to kind of want that out of the hospitality industry. And so maybe it's some type of opt-in option for when you're traveling, so that you can still maintain that level of service that you're looking for, but it can also be a cost cut for when people don't want it.
Right.
Great idea.
That's a good point. Yeah. Like Donna said, opt in for a different rate,
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So technology, what we're really here to talk about today, I suppose, and how that can help you manage these labor costs and your cost of goods. So optimizing scheduling with third-party software like workforce.com. There's nothing better than to be working on your schedules in a live environment that's dynamically costing it. Have your managers living in those environments, seeing what the actual costs are, every incremental change they make to those rosters. And as I mentioned earlier as well, really focusing on that forecasting piece, get your budgets and your sales budgets into the system so that managers see that when they're building these rosters and understand what their targets are and see those percentage of sales to the wages and really make good decisions, good planning moving ahead, because there's things we can help you with on the day in terms of, live insights into what's happening, which we'll show you soon. But if you've made bad decisions, the day before, it's hard to chase your tail and address that lagging indicator rather than the leading indicator. So, I can't stress more. Take the time, get those schedules right, forecast effectively, and schedule based on that demand. Track those wages. And make sure you're reporting really well as well. You make sure you've got a suite of reports that are simple to read, surface the information you need very clearly for people. Don't bury it in numbers and numbers and numbers. Pick the right KPIs, surface that to the people that it needs to be surfaced to, so that they know all the time what the goal is, what they need to be aiming for, and they see it very clearly.
Right.
The live wage tracker. So Workforce's live wage tracker, 15-minute increments, exactly what's going on a day. I used to live in this day to day. I'd have it on my iPad, walking around between the venues I was managing, and hit the phone when you see something that shouldn't be happening. Call those managers, sign staff off, get them on a break, whatever you can do on a minute-to-minute basis to make those incremental improvements to those wage costs. You're gonna thank yourself, at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, or at the end of the year when you do your financial reporting and look at your profit and loss. And live wage tracker is the best way to address things on the day, which I touched on a little earlier.
Yeah.
Those reporting insights that I was mentioning, Workforce is great in that we can surface some really cool reports that make sense to the people that work in your businesses. Not all businesses report on the same things or like the same KPIs. This insight here is a lovely, simple one, just showing what our goal is in terms of that cost variance, where we need to be sitting, and how we're actually tracking across days. And from that, you can really, you sit there, do your forecasting with that, showing the historical in front of you, and really understand where your peaks and troughs lie and where you need to improve and where mistakes have been made and learn from that. So, can't recommend that more.
Yeah.
Overtime notifications. So, when you are building those rosters, make sure you have these rules built in so that you know when costs that shouldn't be occurring are, and you can adjust the schedule. I know it's hard at the moment with the lack of labour, but perhaps it's time you make decisions about reducing capacity. Can you afford to pay someone overtime at the back end of the week and be open for the sake of being open, or does that make you unprofitable? People understand at the moment things are compressed and there isn't capacity, so it's probably a time not to be afraid of maintaining those strict opening hours necessarily as well. Like, make the decisions that suit your business and will get you through, is what I would recommend.
And I think that's part of the benefit of having a very strong reporting suite is ultimately reports are useless if you don't act on them, right?
Yeah.
So understanding when overtime is negatively impacting your bottom line. I had a customer that was close to 10 to 15% of their wage costs ended up being overtime costs. And so that's something, if you can identify that and when it's happening and the people that are happening to, that's an easy cut on reducing that operating costs for your business.
Yeah. Nick, I'm kind of curious. Donna mentioned cross training. Do you have any insight as to how that helps or even hinders?
It's just a must these days. Yeah. It really is. Gone are the days, I think, where everyone can be specialized in positions, whether it's a quick service restaurant, a casual restaurant, a cocktail bar. Everyone's got to be able to do something, and I think the blend between front of house and back of house is a wall that we've got to try and break down as best we can too. I know it's hard sometimes, but drastic times call for drastic measures. And look, there's been 100%, Donna. There's been plenty of times in my career where I've had to jump on the fryers or the grill to get a kitchen through a service. I think we need to have we need to make sure the people working for us, are aware that might be a thing, but also make sure they've got the tools and the skills to be able to do those things when we need them to do it. Gone is the day where the cocktail bartender can just stand on dispense and wait for those tickets to come from the floor staff and make drinks and not move all night. Like, I think we've all got to pitch in and do something differently and multitask, and that's not going to go away with labor costs growing, the minimum wage rate changes, all these things impacting. Everyone's going to have to wear many, many hats. So,
yeah.
I think everyone sort of agrees. That's great. So,
great quote, Susanna. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in the hospitality industry, it's all hands on deck. There's really it's an industry that really does live so much in the present, and forecasting is such an amazing tool that I believe that every hospitality business can seriously get major use out of, and for even times beyond the pandemic itself, I think it could be applicable to compare and contrast the trends that we are seeing now to maybe even 5 years from now.
And look, I think it also is a value add in the workplace. People might not see it that way, but like, doing something different for a day can be as good as a holiday.
Right.
Like, if you've always been the waiter on a certain section in a restaurant, it can be refreshing to mix the drinks for a night, perhaps, or be at the pass, running the pass with the head chef. So there's positives, and that's how we spin it to the staff, I think. And but making sure they've got the tools and they see a positivity and a value in it.
Sure. Yeah. You may be an expensive housekeeper, but it also might help you see what needs to change in those jobs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like what Donna
100%.
said, make each day a party and celebrate. Yeah, couldn't agree more, Donna. No, that's awesome. It's great.
So that was, I guess that was really it from me.
Yeah, as we close out the webinar, be sure to keep an eye out for a survey that's going to pop up right on your screen there. So you'll be able to see just how prepared your own company is for these increasing operational costs. Also you'll have a chance to win an $100 Amazon gift card, which we all know and love. So be sure to fill it out. It'll only take a minute. And we'll be able to get back to you with those results, get back to you with the winner for the gift card, and be sure to keep an eye out on that inbox. But until then, we'll see you at the next webinar, everyone.